Hey everybody, this is Perch. As I mentioned, I've been traveling lately. You ever notice that some places have a smell? Like you just you have they like Orlando. I was recently in Orlando. The place smells. Very human. It's nothing wrong with it. It just has a very distinctive smell. So does Vegas. A lot of these places. Anyway, I think you could blindfold me and take me off of a plane, and I'm like, yep, this is I'm in Newark. You just there's ways. I don't know. I don't know why it strikes me so much, but some places just have a hardened smell. I'm curious if anybody else believes that's true or has heard that, or I don't know. By the way, somebody wrote in. This is not the full mail, but just like, hey, Perch, why do you do rambly bullshit stuff for a minute or two before you get to the actual topic? I don't know. Why not? That's that's the answer. I don't know because I honestly it often sparks a pretty interesting conversation in the comments. To be honest with you, I mean, it's something a little different. It's like, well, you can do some editing, get your videos down by a couple minutes, and just be really to the point. I'm like, I could, but I'd take away some of the charm. Well, whatever. All right, so here's the actual mail: creators, collectors, and the values of comics. Okay, it says, hey, Birch. First off, I want to thank you for reading my email, and hope you're doing well. I'm doing fantastic. So I'm doing. So I have what I think is an interesting topic for collectors. Okay. When I think of the classics like Action Comics #1 or Detective Comics #27, they mean uh, they mean just as much to me and my peers as any Renaissance painting. So imagine a book created in this day and age that can get as much attention as a Bisquat, or Banksy piece. Basquat. You know what? I think I'm butchering that. I did art history, but I studied mainly the Baroque. Anyway, I won't go down that path. Anyway, I apologize. So, when, if ever, will we get back to that? There are so many comics out there, most of which have been adapted into movies and television shows, but the comic itself isn't worth shit. Why? Now, based on the headline of this, I'm assuming you mean the value of it, not like the comic isn't worth shit, meaning it's bad. Because like for example, um, they're about to make Secret Wars, right? In the Avengers, Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, I think. So Secret Wars #1, the one in the '80s, classic comic, worth if you have it slabbed, it's worth a decent amount of money, but certainly not worth Action Comics #1 level of money. And so I'm assuming you're meaning that because the quality of that comic is quite good. It's an enjoyable book. I know some people think the first Secret Wars series was garbage, but I don't know. I find that a pretty enjoyable comic. I never have gotten the people who feel like that comic was trash. That's a whole other but here's something else to put in the comments. Do you believe that the 1980s Secret Wars limited series was trash? I mean it's simple. It's simple. It's not Watchmen, but I've always felt that was a damn good little story. It had some cool stuff to it. I don't know. I always enjoyed it, but regardless. The simple reason for a lot of this is that there's kind of two big reasons why we don't have the same dollar amount for comics that we used to. Number one, it's easier now to preserve the comic, meaning and people are aware that comics can become collector's items. So what this means is that when a comic is produced, if there's a sense that it's valuable, or even if it's not that valuable, people are bagging and boarding it, slabbing it. It means the quantity out there in a good condition is much higher. The fundamentals of collecting and value usually comes down to supply and demand. And right now there's plenty of supply. Compared to a Action Comics #1 or something that was made almost 100 years ago, where it wasn't as easy to keep the comic in good shape. Comics were considered a collector's item. So a lot of people were just throwing them away or, rolling them up, putting in the back of their pants while they're walking around. And so, the comic wasn't treated as well. And so a good copy of this comic is scarce. Even an existing version of this comic is scarce because of just the time that's passed. But as soon as comics started to become more of a collector's item, and it was also produced to the newsstand, which means there were a lot more of them in circulation. There's more of them, and because there's more of them, the value is lower. It's really as simple as that. In order to get back to that in today's day and age, you'd have to have kind of a print run that is, so small that that the comic, has a chance to become super valuable. But if put it this way, if you get a comic that is really good, that has really good art or a really good story, or introduces, or just has a character that, somebody thinks has value, because of the mechanism of comics itself, they won't it won't be printed in a low amount. There'll be tons, and it will get marketing. A bunch of people come in, the speculate, people will snap it up on day one, and they'll bag and board it. You may see something shoot up to $50 to $100, but you're not going to see something, shoot up to $500,000 in value. There's not the there's not the scarcity to make that happen. So it actually has nothing really to do with the quality of the comic. If Marvel introduced some new character right now that was just like an amazing character, like just one that everybody agreed was a good one, and they put an artist on it, was good, and it was just a really good comic, a number one comic, and it was everything everybody's been yelling about, everything everybody's been wanting. And if they produce that today, it wouldn't have a prayer of getting to $500,000 in value, because of the amount that would be printed, and the people would come in and buy it. And I mean, hell, even the crowdfunded books. So this is one of the not flaws, but I mean, if you're talking about huge value, like Isom, right? That number one issue from Eric July. He had a bunch of different versions of that comic that you could buy, in kind of how it was done. He sold several of them. People came in, wanting to support that, wanting to buy a comic. Put it this way, it's scarce in the sense that even with the money he made, and as proud as everybody must be, he didn't do 100,000 print run of that comic or anywhere close to that. So the comic is in theory more scarce than some of the big two. The average Marvel comic has a higher print run, not dollar amount, but print run, than what was done there. So it's more scarce, but it's not scarce enough. And the people who are buying it were all comic collectors, or people wanting to support Eric July, I suppose, but a lot of people were collectors. So they took that comic and they immediately kind of bagged and boarded and protected and everything else. And there was a lot of them out there. So if you fast forward like 10 years from now, let's say that July continues to produce comics, and he's got, I don't know, whatever, 50 issues out by now, and somebody's optioned a movie, and the whole property has really taken off. The number one issue may climb to, a healthy amount. It could be worth $100, $500, even $1,000. But again, it can't climb to that Action Comics number one level in terms of collectability, because it's just not scarce enough. And because the people who bought in at the beginning most likely didn't destroy that book. They didn't, throw it up on the shelf, or, use it to swat flies or whatever they did. They treated it as a collector's item from the beginning, and therefore that's where you got. So I've seen a number of crowdfunded books like this thing is, could be the next Action Comics number one. It won't be, though. Again, it has nothing to do with quality, nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with any of that. It purely is around the demand and how it works. We've entered into a different phase. In order to get back to a place where comics could be worth like $500,000 again, you would have to almost completely tank the industry, meaning all the big players would have to go away. Comics would have to revert to being kind of an underground thing for a while. And then you'd have to let 50 years go by. I mean, it's such a long-term play. Comics are too entwined with collectability now, which wasn't the case when, Detective Comics 27 was coming out in some of these early books. So that's the fundamental difference. Anyway, very, very boring answer to you're probably wondering, you were expecting a more exciting answer to that. So I'm sorry, but that's basic. It's basic economics, and it's basic supply and demand. That's how you got here. So anyway, thank you very much for the question. Do I have it wrong? What do you think? Is there a different route for a comic to get to $500,000 in value? Pick whatever time period you want. I will tell you this. Dark Crisis number one. If I travel to the year, 2120, Dark Crisis number one is not going to be worth $500,000. I'll call it right now. But yeah, or maybe we'll see. I'll have to live around to find out. Anyway, thanks for listening.